Imagine this. You are standing in a crowded room, voices weaving into each other like 1,000 overlapping echoes, laughter spilling from smiling mouths, eyes darting, hands gesturing, masks everywhere, though none of them visible. You sense it, though, that strange shiver of realization that perhaps no one here is entirely who they seem. Behind every smile lies a shadow. Behind every word, a hidden thought. Behind every identity, a mask carefully chosen for the moment. This is the stage of human existence Carl Jung described with eerie precision. Life as theater, people as actors, the psyche draped in costumes of survival, ambition, fear, and desire. The mask, the persona, becomes not just a tool for interacting with others, but sometimes a prison, a face glued too tightly to remove without tearing the skin beneath. For Jung, this was not a harmless metaphor, but a dangerous truth. The mask, he said, is necessary for society, a bridge between the inner self and the outer world. Yet when the mask is mistaken for the face, when the performance becomes the only identity a person knows, the soul begins to fracture. And here, in that fracture, lies something terrifying. You may never truly know who stands before you. The friend who comforts you may secretly resent you. The colleague who praises you may secretly envy you. Even the lover who kisses you may unconsciously project their wounds upon you, seeing not you, but a ghost of someone else in your place. Humanity walks in shadows, pretending to live in light. But what about you? Have you ever wondered how many masks you wear? One at work, one with your family, another with your friends. Perhaps even another when you are alone, scrolling through your thoughts at midnight, performing to an invisible audience. Some of these masks are conscious, deliberate. Your professional tone, your polite smile. Others slip on without your awareness, crafted by childhood wounds, by society's unspoken demands, by your fear of rejection. Stoic philosophers warned of this long before Jung. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of living in truth, stripped of ornament, while Epictetus reminded his students that roles are assigned by fate. But the soul must not lose itself in the play. Yet look around, and you will see a paradox. The more we adapt, the more we risk vanishing behind the roles we perform. The unsettling truth is that masks are not merely superficial. They sink into the psyche, seeping into dreams, desires, and behaviors, until the original face is forgotten. Jung saw this in patients who entered his office with tidy smiles but eyes clouded with despair. Men who played the role of strong providers while their inner lives were hollow. Women who embodied dutiful caretakers while their unlived passions curdled into bitterness. When the mask is worshipped, the shadow grows restless. The hidden self, silenced and ignored, begins to rebel. Through anxiety, depression, destructive habits, or sudden eruptions of rage. What you refuse to live outwardly, you will be haunted by inwardly. It is here that the story turns uncanny. Imagine looking into the eyes of a friend, a sibling, a partner, and realizing you do not see them but their mask. Worse still, imagine looking into the mirror and realizing the same about yourself, that your laughter is rehearsed, your opinions borrowed, your smile a disguise. Who are you beneath it all? Do you dare to know? Most do not. Jung warned that stripping away masks is the work of individuation, a path fraught with terror, because beneath the persona lies the shadow, the rejected, unwanted parts of the self. The envy you deny, the selfishness you despise, the anger you repress, the desires you bury deep. Society tells you to wear a smile. The shadow whispers with teeth bared. There is something almost supernatural in this, the way masks and shadows intertwine, shaping destinies invisibly. The collective unconscious, Jung said, carries archetypal masks, universal roles humanity shares, the hero, the mother, the trickster, the sage. People step into these archetypes unconsciously, compelled by something larger than themselves. But when you mistake the mask for your whole being, you become its slave. The trickster laughs through you. The martyr suffers through you. The tyrant commands through you. Archetypes live, Jung said, like gods inside the psyche, and they demand sacrifice when ignored. Stoics taught equanimity in the face of life's roles, but Jung added the darker warning: deny the gods within, and they will devour you from the inside out. Think again of that crowded room. Every face smiling, every voice blending. How many people there are truly themselves? How many are simply masks worn over shadows, roles handed down by family, culture, fear? The scariest truth of all is not that others wear masks, but that you yourself cannot easily know where your mask ends and your face begins. What if your entire life has been a performance? What if the person you believe yourself to be is only another role, another disguise, another borrowed identity? This is not a comfortable question, but it is the question Jung believed one must face if one is ever to awaken. The mask protects, but it also deceives. It gives you acceptance, but at the price of truth. The mask keeps you safe in society, but it suffocates the soul in silence. And so, as Jung and the Stoics alike remind us, one day the performance must end, and the curtain must fall. Will you be ready to see the face beneath? There is a peculiar chill that descends when the mask slips, even for a moment. It might happen during an argument, when anger surges past the carefully rehearsed pleasantries. It might happen in solitude, when the silence of your own room presses against you like a mirror you cannot escape. Or it might happen in the middle of an ordinary day, when a stranger's gaze lingers too long, and suddenly you feel exposed, as if your very soul has been caught off guard. That fleeting glimpse, raw, unscripted, unmasked, terrifies because it reminds you that most of what you show is not your essence, but your armor. Carl Jung called this the terrifying work of confrontation. To see the shadow, not in others but in yourself. The shadow is not merely darkness. It is the entirety of what has been repressed, hidden, unlived. The emotions you were taught to bury, the talents you feared to express, the truths you felt would alienate those you loved. As children, people learn quickly that the world does not welcome every part of them. A boy who cried too often was told to harden. A girl who expressed too much ambition was told to soften. A sensitive soul was told to toughen. And so, piece by piece, the authentic self was carved down, until only the acceptable fragments were allowed to see daylight. Those fragments became the mask. Everything else retreated into shadow. The Stoics, too, warned of this dissonance. Seneca wrote that most men wander not because they lack paths, but because they wear themselves thin, trying to become what they are not. The tragedy is not simply that people lie to others, but that they lie to themselves. They grow accustomed to the performance. They convince themselves they are the role. They forget the buried self until it rises again in dreams, in illness, in sudden storms of emotion that seem to come from nowhere. But they are not from nowhere. They are from the depths. Have you ever felt it? That strange eruption when something small, an offhand remark, a trivial disappointment, ignites a fire far larger than the spark deserved. That is the shadow breaking through the mask. Or perhaps you have felt it in longing, when the life you live feels ghostly compared to the one you sense you could be living. The mask is steady, smiling, proper, but the shadow whispers of another path, another possibility, a self unlived. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Consider that chilling thought. Much of what you think is destiny may only be the silent hand of your unacknowledged shadow. This is why people sometimes appear as strangers overnight. The devoted spouse who suddenly leaves without warning. The dutiful worker who burns out and quits in rage. The pious believer who abandons their faith in a single season of doubt. It looks sudden, but it is not. It is the mask cracking, revealing the shadow that had been accumulating force behind it for years. When the mask can no longer contain the pressure, the eruption comes like a volcano, indiscriminate and destructive. What has been denied does not vanish. It waits, and then it claims its due. There is something profoundly unsettling about recognizing that most people, perhaps even you, are living on the brink of such eruptions. Look into the world's conflicts, the betrayals between friends, the cruelty that emerges without warning. At their roots are masks and shadows colliding. One person projects their hidden anger onto another. One nation projects its unlived fear onto its neighbor. Jung saw projection as the most common human blindness, the failure to recognize one's own darkness, and the instinct to see it instead in others. The liar sees deception everywhere. The jealous one suspects betrayal in every glance. The fearful one sees enemies in every shadow. And so humanity drapes its inner battles across the world, mistaking internal wounds for external threats. The Stoics would advise detachment here. Do not be disturbed by what you cannot control. But Jung pressed further. How can you detach from what lives inside you? You cannot sever the shadow. You must turn toward it. The scariest truth is that until you embrace your darkness, you will forever be ruled by it. And here lies the paradox. The very parts of yourself you fear most are the same parts that hold your vitality, your creativity, your strength. The anger you repress may also contain your power to set boundaries. The envy you deny may hold the seed of your ambition. The grief you silence may conceal your deepest compassion. The shadow is not an enemy to destroy. It is a truth to integrate. But few dare to face it. Most prefer the safety of masks, even if the mask is suffocating. They keep smiling when they want to scream, keep nodding when they want to protest, keep playing the role long after the soul has grown weary, and the world applauds them for it, praising their politeness, their reliability, their conformity. Yet inside they are haunted, half-dead exiles in their own skin. So you must ask yourself, when the curtain falls, who will remain? Will you recognize the figure beneath the mask, or will you find only emptiness where a self was meant to be? The haunting truth is that the longer the mask is worn, the harder it is to take off. And yet, somewhere beneath it all, the shadow waits, sometimes as a monster, sometimes as a guide, always as the mirror of what you refuse to see. There is an ancient terror that arises when you realize the mask you wear is not only a disguise, it is a parasite. For the more faithfully you perform it, the more it begins to feed on you. At first it is harmless, a polite mask for conversation, a professional mask for work. But years pass, and the mask becomes habitual, automatic, so natural that you no longer sense the difference between your true self and the costume you have been forced to wear. This is the great danger Jung described, the identification with the persona. When the mask is mistaken for the soul, the individual becomes hollow, a walking mannequin repeating lines written by others. And yet, there is something even darker. If you do not know yourself, others will decide who you are. Society, parents, lovers, institutions, they all hand you masks, sometimes without your noticing. A man might become the eternal provider, sacrificing all joy in the name of responsibility. A woman might become the eternal caregiver, silencing her voice in the name of harmony. An artist might become the eternal entertainer, laughed at and adored, but never taken seriously as a full human being. Archetypes seize them and they comply. Jung warned that what begins as adaptation quickly hardens into imprisonment. And prison, no matter how gilded, corrodes the soul. The Stoics understood this too. Epictetus reminded his students that while fate assigns roles, the choice of how to play them belongs to the soul. But if you forget that the role is temporary, you begin to mistake the costume for your skin. You live not as a man or woman, but as a role, the obedient son, the dutiful worker, the charming socialite. And the longer you live this way, the less you remember how to live as yourself. Have you ever noticed how uncanny it feels when someone breaks character? The strict father who suddenly weeps, the disciplined leader who confesses weakness, the cheerful friend who admits despair. For a moment, the mask slips and you glimpse the raw, unguarded self behind it. Sometimes it is beautiful, sometimes unsettling, but always it is real. And then, almost immediately, the mask returns. A laugh, a deflection, a change of subject. People cannot bear to be naked for long. Vulnerability frightens them, because it threatens the illusion they have so carefully built. Yet, paradoxically, those fleeting glimpses are the moments that touch us most deeply, when for an instant we meet not the mask but the human soul. But there is another layer of horror. Masks do not only protect us from others, they protect us from ourselves. To remove the mask is to risk encountering the shadow in its raw form, with all its rage, longing, grief, and chaos. Jung warned that if you strip the mask too quickly, without preparation, you may fall into despair, even madness. The shadow is not tame. It contains everything you have exiled from consciousness, and when it returns, it does so with teeth. That is why people often project instead of confronting it. It is safer to believe your neighbor is selfish than to admit your own selfishness. It is easier to condemn the world's corruption than to face your own deceit. Projection is humanity's oldest defense, the psychological trick of fighting your demons in others, so you never have to face them in yourself. Yet this is precisely why masks breed violence. If you refuse to confront the shadow, you will cast it onto others, turning them into scapegoats for your own sins. History is filled with examples: witch hunts, persecutions, wars waged against the other. Beneath the surface, these were not merely political or social struggles. They were projections, the collective mask of a people hiding their collective shadow. The enemy is always, in some secret way, ourselves. And here is the paradox. The mask protects you from rejection, but it guarantees loneliness. You are loved not for who you are, but for the role you play. The more convincingly you wear it, the less anyone knows you. Jung once said that the most terrifying discovery is to realize you are not truly known, not even by yourself. What could be more haunting than to live your whole life applauded, respected, admired, yet die a stranger to your own soul? The Stoics would tell you that death is not frightening, only the unlived life. Jung would agree, but he would add, the unlived life is buried beneath the mask, waiting in the shadow, demanding to be seen. If you refuse it, the soul will find ways to punish you. Through emptiness, anxiety, the gnawing sense that something is missing no matter what you achieve. The shadow does not vanish when ignored. It rots and its stench follows you everywhere. So ask yourself, which masks have fused to your face? Which roles have you worn so long you mistake them for your identity? And do you have the courage to peel them back layer by layer until the stranger beneath begins to speak? That voice, though frightening, may be the only one that can tell you who you truly are. What would you think if I told you that the greatest monsters you will ever face do not live in forests, caves, or haunted houses, but in your own psyche? They are not creatures of claw and fang, but of repression and denial. And the masks you wear are not just disguises, but talismans to keep those inner monsters at bay. Jung understood this unsettling reality. The psyche is not a neat, civilized place. It is a wilderness, vast and unmapped, where ancient instincts and forgotten wounds prowl just beneath the surface. When you wear a mask, you are not only trying to protect yourself from the judgment of others, you are shielding yourself from the abyss within. Think of your dreams. How often do they show you faces that shift, strangers who seem familiar, or characters who wear disguises? Dreams, Jung believed, are the theater of the unconscious, where masks dissolve and the shadow roams free. In dreams, your polished persona cannot hold its ground. The man who pretends to be strong in waking life dreams of weakness. The woman who plays the nurturer dreams of abandonment. The polite professional dreams of violence. These are not accidents. They are signals, messages from the shadow that cannot speak in daylight. Jung warned, ignore your dreams and you ignore your own soul. But there is something even more haunting, the anima and animus, those inner figures that embody the unlived side of your soul. In every man, the feminine waits, silenced but yearning. In every woman, the masculine stirs, unexpressed but restless. Masks suppress these figures, forcing men into brittle roles of stoic hardness, forcing women into cages of perpetual softness. And so the anima becomes twisted into manipulation or resentment, the animus into tyranny or withdrawal. Lovers project these inner figures onto each other, mistaking projection for passion. This is why relationships so often collapse into bitterness. Two masks colliding, two shadows wrestling, each demanding the other carry what they cannot face in themselves. What begins as love ends as projection, and both remain strangers to the depths of their own being. The Stoics counseled control over passions, but Jung would caution, control without integration is repression, and repression eventually erupts. Imagine a man who denies his tenderness for decades. One day, it emerges uncontrollably as obsession or worse, cruelty disguised as love. Imagine a woman who denies her strength. One day it bursts forth as destructive rebellion, scorched earth left behind. What is denied does not die, it returns magnified. And the longer you hide behind the mask, the more terrifying its return becomes. This is why Jung spoke of individuation as a kind of initiation, almost shamanic in nature. To walk this path is to step into the underworld of your own unconscious, to meet the shadow and the anima or animus, and to wrestle with them until you are transformed. But this path is not gentle. It's strips away illusions, it dissolves masks, it demands sacrifice. You must give up the comfort of being admired for who you pretend to be, in order to be reborn as who you truly are. Few dare this. Most cling to the mask, even as it suffocates them, because the familiar prison feels safer than the unknown wilderness of freedom. Consider the collective consequences of this fear. Entire societies live behind masks, presenting themselves as civilized, rational, enlightened, while beneath the surface, shadows writhe. Wars, genocides, corruption. These are not merely political failures, but eruptions of the collective unconscious. Jung saw this during the rise of fascism in Europe, an entire people wearing the mask of national pride, while projecting their collective shadow onto scapegoated groups. When a society refuses to confront its darkness, it will always invent another to carry its sins. And what is true of nations is also true of individuals. The question returns to you quietly but urgently. Who carries your shadow? Which people in your life do you secretly despise because they reflect back what you cannot admit in yourself? Which groups do you judge harshly, not because of their faults, but because they mirror your repressed desires or weaknesses? Jung's warning is as relevant now as ever. What you hate in others often reveals what you fear in yourself. To live unconscious of this is to be a puppet, your strings pulled by the parts of you that live in exile. Yet, haunting as this may be, there is hope. For beneath the mask, beyond the shadow, within the depths of the unconscious, lies not only darkness but treasure. The Greeks knew this in their myths. The hero must descend into the underworld, not only to face death, but to bring back gold, wisdom, or the beloved. Jung called this the process of individuation, the return to wholeness, where mask and shadow are reconciled, where anima and animus are integrated, where the fragmented soul becomes one. But the descent is unavoidable. If you wish to live authentically, if you wish to know peace, you must pass through the fearsome gates of your own psyche. The mask will resist, the shadow will frighten, the anima and animus will seduce or confuse, but only by facing them can you emerge as someone whole, someone real, someone free. The journey is not for the faint-hearted, but perhaps the faint-hearted are those who need it most. Some women live their entire lives hidden beneath borrowed faces, never once daring to show the one that is truly theirs. Some men, too, walk the earth as hollow statues, admired for their strength, feared for their power, but inside they are trembling children who never learned to look their shadow in the eye. These are not isolated tragedies. They are archetypal fates. Jung knew them well, for he saw them again and again. Souls lost not to death, but to disguise. Prisoners of the mask that society handed them, worshippers of a false self. And it is this kind of death in life that is perhaps the most terrifying of all. The longer the mask is worn, the more fragile the soul beneath becomes. It is like keeping a bird in a cage for so many years that, when the door is finally opened, it no longer remembers how to fly. The mask gives safety, yes, but at a terrible cost. The gradual erosion of spontaneity, the dimming of curiosity, the withering of passion. Jung warned that those who cling too tightly to their persona eventually lose the capacity for depth. They are liked, even admired, but never truly known. And the loneliest fate is to be surrounded by applause while your true self dies unheard. The Stoics would have recognized this as slavery, though of a subtler kind. Epictetus said that the man who is praised is not free, for his peace depends on the mouths of others. Likewise, the woman who fears rejection is not free, for her identity is chained to the approval she craves. Jung's language was different, but the warning was the same. The mask is not freedom. It is bondage. To live for appearance, for image, for persona, is to hand over your soul to the crowd. And the crowd is a cruel master, fickle and ever-changing. But let us imagine for a moment what happens when someone dares to take the mask off. At first there is fear. They feel naked, exposed, uncertain of how others will see them. Some friends recoil, preferring the comfort of the familiar role. Some family members resist, disturbed by the change. But slowly a strange new strength begins to stir, for without the mask, the soul begins to breathe. Anger once repressed transforms into courage. Grief once buried opens into compassion, Desire, once denied, blossoms into creativity. This is what Jung meant when he said that individuation is not the denial of darkness, but the union of opposites. To be whole is to hold both light and shadow, strength and weakness, tenderness and power, and to no longer pretend otherwise. Yet do not be deceived. This rebirth is not a one-time act. Masks cling stubbornly, shadows slip back in, projections arise anew. The work is continuous, a lifelong dialogue with the unconscious. Jung compared it to alchemy, the endless refinement of the soul, the transformation of base matter into gold. The Stoics, too, spoke of philosophy not as a theory, but as a practice, daily discipline against illusion. Both paths converge in the same truth. Authenticity is not achieved once, but fought for again and again. Still, there is a kind of peace on the other side. Imagine a life where you no longer fear being seen, because you no longer hide. A life where you can stand in silence without performing, where your yes means yes and your no means no, where your laughter is unforced, your tears unashamed. This is the life that Jung called individuation, the birth of the self beyond the mask, the reconciliation of shadow and persona, the alignment of soul with its deeper purpose. It is not perfection, it is wholeness, and wholeness is the only true freedom. So ask yourself one final time, what mask are you wearing right now? Whose approval are you still chasing? Whose expectations are you still performing for? And what would happen if you set them down? Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. Would you lose everything you think you are? Or would you finally find yourself? The choice is terrifying, yes. But beneath the terror lies liberation. Beneath the mask lies the face. Beneath the shadow lies the self. Beneath the noise of the world lies the quiet truth that you were never meant to be anyone else but who you are. When the mask falls, when the shadow is embraced, when the soul is no longer split in two, something extraordinary happens. Life ceases to be a performance and becomes a presence. And in that presence there is a peace the world cannot give and cannot take away. This is the scary truth Jung left us with. Most people will never dare to remove the mask. But if you do, if you face the shadow, integrate the hidden, and step into wholeness, you will discover something far greater than safety. You will discover freedom, and freedom once found can never be taken from you.